he's not a political thinker, he's not a philosopher, he's a novelist. However, Flannery wants to look at the nature of contemporary America. In this section here, we have a conversation between two people, Maureen and Nathaniel. Nathaniel is the central character in the novel, and Nathaniel works for a corporation called EKK. Nathaniel is a liberal. He's lived in Chicago most of his life, and around cultured and quite liberal people. But he's offered a better paid job further south by EKK. And his job is he's part of a group of people who are running a series of private prisons. So in America, and unfortunately in Britain too, the prison service is privatised or partly privatised, in that the government will allocate a certain amount of its budget, say, to running the prison. So it will have, say, 100 million euros. Rather than build its own prisons and pay its own staff, it will invite companies to bid for that money. It will say, okay, we'll give this money to whichever private company can run our prison for us, and the private company will take the money from the government and then be responsible for the running of the prison. So it's the privatisation of the prison service, which has partially happened in Britain and has gone a lot further in America. So EKK are a private corporation which run prisons in the southern states of America. And Maureen is explaining to Nathaniel how EKK propose to run their prison. And essentially what they want to do is, as a private corporation, they want to generate the maximum amount of revenue. That's what corporations do. They want to maximize profits. Okay, so it says, in the follow-up meeting, Maureen elaborated the true scope of her plan. It's the plan for revenue positive rehabilitation. Flannery has this delightful way of finding words that sound as though they could have been coined by a business corporation. See, Nathaniel, prisons can no longer be in the business of providing cheap labour to the state. We're not going to have our corrections populace making license plates or furniture and providing it at cost to the government anymore. So Nathaniel replies, and what about the charitable work they've been doing? Don't you think that's important? Maureen squinted, bunching up her lips and nose. We just can't afford to have them refurbishing church pews or training dogs for the blind or doing anything else that costs us money or fails to exploit the labour potential of the system. The other factor is, we urgently need to down adjust inmate income. So what kind of adjustment do you have in mind? Right now we're only paying them 10% of minimum wage. Maureen shook her head. I think we need to aim for a top tier payment of 1% of minimum, with penalties for poor work and failure to meet quotas. Require minimum 40-hour work weeks of all able-bodied prisoners regardless of age. Our prison doctors are prepared to declare all but terminal cases able-bodied. So Nathaniel asks, and if they refuse to work, you throw them in the hole, put them in isolation, describe them as non-cooperative. Rather than making prisons a cost, we want to turn them into engines of pure profit. Inmates will make EKK products and components, and all those things that they make are products we can sell or components that contribute to things or processes we already sell. It's a genius proposition, Nathaniel. In states like this one, we have a permanent contract for corrections management that can only be broken if some jackass introduces a bill that makes it through the legislature and gets signed by the governor. Such a scenario would require a gross failure on their part, and that's just not going to happen. The states pay us a fee to look after their criminals, to catch them in some places, to process them, to house them, maintain them, rehabilitate them, release them, manage the parole, monitor movements, and start all over again when they reoffend. And we know that most of them do. And I'll let you in a little secret. In a way, you know, we kind of like that. Recidivism isn't necessarily a bad thing from our perspective. Once we've got this up and running, we're going to be looking at a semi-permanent tagging and employment of parolees so we can mobilise corrections labour for jobs. Let's employ the parolees. That's true rehabilitation. And when they fall out of line, we'll put them back inside. If the law is in our way, you're empowered to use our lobbying agencies to get the laws changed. Research the law, research areas where manufacturing is costing us much more than it should. Find us way to make prisons pay. Okay, and I want to say this, for me, this picture of Flannery's interested in America generally. He's not interested in prisons as such. And this is, for Flannery, a snapshot of contemporary America. And what I suggest is it's a snapshot of Fukuyama's America. It's a snapshot of the realization of freedom in the world. And to me it looks like a vision of hell, actually. It looks awful. It's a society nobody would want to live in. And I think what we have here is a corporation, EKK, which it wants to go to great efforts to fulfill Fukuyama's conception of freedom. It wants to be free from government control. So it says, we don't want some jackass legislator introducing a bill that will restrict our ability to maximise profits. And you're empowered to get the law changed, to reduce the restrictions on what we can do to prisoners. So the EKK want as little as possible in the way of restraints on how they can behave. They want the maximum freedom. And EKK are what Thomas Hobbes would have described as an artificial person. So when Hobbes was concerned about the way other people can impinge on your freedom, the way other people can restrict your freedom, he differentiated two kinds of people. He said natural people, people like us, ordinary human beings, and artificial persons, which, with a bit of extension to the 21st century, we can regard as things like corporations. They would be what Hobbes would regard as an artificial person. And in this case, it's an artificial person which is limiting the freedom of the people it has to deal with. It's limiting their freedom by making them do what it wants. And that's the basic limitation of freedom, when somebody makes you fulfill their purposes and not your own. So the more negative freedom EKK has, the less freedom the people it deals with actually have. And I don't want to get too involved with the idea that the people that EKK deals with are prisoners, because if I can be allowed a bit of a metaphorical extension here, I'd like to say that just to digress very slightly. I remember seeing the English novelist Kazuo Ishiguro talk about his novel The Remains of the Day, which is the story of a servant. And he was asked what if he had to sum up what the book was about in one sentence, he'd say it's that we're all servants. He feels that we're all stand disempowered at the behest of somebody else, that our relationship with people who have power over us is that we're all servants. And I would suggest that if there's a single sentence that expresses this, it's that we're all prisoners. So I wouldn't want people to get too excited about the idea that it's dealing with prisons, because when you're in the power of somebody else, say an artificial person, like a corporation, if you're an employee of that corporation, they want to get as much from you as they possibly can. And they want to give you as little as possible. That's the nature of capitalist contractual relationships. That people enter into these relationships in order to get something from you. So I would say, in this sense, with regard to certain ways of operating in the world, we're all prisoners. We're all, as it were, at the bottom end of this hierarchy. Very few of us are at the top of it. And in the context of Flannery's book, what we see is the boss of EKK trying to get the most from Maureen and give her the least. So he wants to get the most work from her and pay her the lowest he can. And Maureen wants to get the most from Nathaniel and give the least in return, because it's an exploitative relationship. This is the nature of these relationships. And Nathaniel's job is to get as much as possible from the prisoners and to give them as little as possible. So they're going to work 40 hours a week and they're going to be paid 1% of the minimum wage. And if they make any mistakes, they'll be fined, so they won't even get the 1%.